All right, thank you for taking the time to join us on the program Global Matters. This special day, the third day of the midterm election. And this is a program where we bring you issues that shape the world, issues of global agenda, determine our national and common interest, especially our interest in Africa and indeed our interest in Nigeria. My name still remains the same. I'm Tunde Alabi. Thank you for taking the time to join us on the program today. 3 days after the U.S. midterm election, it remains unclear which party will control the Congress and the Senate. However, what we do know is that Biden and Democrats have avoided their worst nightmares, a red wave that some strategists predicted will be propelled by inflation and economic woes. Although President Biden has acknowledged that the Republicans could walk away from the midterms with a narrow majority in the House, and a vow to work with with everybody in the House in order to secure bipartisan support that will push his agenda forward. With votes still being counted in Arizona, Nevada, and the runoff in Georgia, the Senate race is too tight to determine who controls it. What actually determined the direction Americans voted in this election? Why did the red wave prediction fail? How will the midterm election determine how much President Biden will achieve in the remaining 2 years of his government? How will this re-election, the election victory of the Florida governor Ron Desantis boost his presidential ambition? What more? With more American-born Nigerians winning big in the election, how does that impact on Nigerians in the States? A couple of other more questions I'll be taking a look at the program today. But joining us on the show today is the Voice of America's correspondent, Ignatius Annor, and Professor Akin Falaiye, a former senior fellow at the National Institute of Legislative and Democratic Studies. He will be joining us from Houston, and Ignatius will be joining us from Washington, D.C. on the show. Thanks a lot for taking time. We'll come back to join my guests after this break, and I will be bringing in Ignatius, colleague from Voice of America, be giving us analysis of the U.S. election. But back to join Ignatius after this short break. Don't go away. We work to bring you global issues that shape the world, issues of global agenda that determine our national and common interests. Our interests, especially in Africa and indeed in Nigeria. And we bring you the behind the scene of the stories through our studio analysis.
Good and efficient legal process is one of the main things that we realize lead to the breaches of human rights in Nigeria.
My assessment of the war in Ukraine is very unfortunate.
The reports in the evidential base we're getting about attacks upon Christians, attacks upon Muslims.
We follow the stories and bring you the report from anywhere to everywhere. This is Kavi Oscar. This flight is heading to Budapest. I'll be boarding this bus now. He's heading straight to Medica with this hand that has represented the symbol of unity after the war in Rwanda, either global, foreign, or diplomatic relations, even diaspora matters. We bring you all here on Global Matters. Watching Global Matters right here on AIT and all our other platforms online on the program, including AIT on the cloud. If you haven't got that, you can just download that AIT cloud. Still talking about the U.S. midterm election, I'm joined by Ignatius Annor, who is the Voice of America correspondent in the U.S., is joining us from Washington, D.C. to give us some breakdowns of what is happening in that election. Ignatius, thank you for taking the time to join us. Ignatius, thanks a lot for your time on the show today.
Tunde, it's a pleasure joining you on the program. How do you do?
Very well, thanks a lot. Quickly give us an overview of what has happened in the last couple of days in this midterm election.
It's literally a wait-and-see attitude at this time across the United States. Because as we speak, since the elections ended on Tuesday, November the 8th, we're still yet to know exactly which of the two major political parties will take control of Congress, and I'm referring to the House of Representatives and that of the Senate. Remember that 435 seats of the lower house were all up for grabs as voters in this country head to the polls, and there were 35 out of the 100 Senate seats. As we speak to you, most of the votes have been counted. We're told that 48 seats have been called for the Democrats as far as the Senate is concerned, and 49 for the Republican. Now, each of the party needs 50 to take absolute control of the Senate. At the lower house, what we do know is that 218 seats is expected to be won by either of the parties to hold majority seats and essentially act as a check on the executive led by President Joe Biden and the White House. As we speak to you, 211 have been called for the Republican Party and 192 for the Democrats. That's according to the Associated Press. It means that it's not clear who will take hold of the House, but it's leaning towards the Republican Party. We are awaiting for results in two key states at this time, Arizona and Nevada, including an election that has gone into a runoff in the state of Georgia because the Democratic senator there, Raphael Warnock, and his main challenger, Herschel Walker of the Republican Party, failed to clinch the 50+1 needed to be declared an outright winner. That's why on December the 3rd, there will be a runoff vote in that particular state as we speak. So the conversation is that why has results slowed in two of the key states that we're all looking at right now, which is the state of Nevada and Arizona. In Arizona, the incumbent, a Democratic senator known as Mark Kelly, as we speak now, is leading slightly ahead of his Republican challenger, Blake. The results are not entirely out yet, but 70% have been counted and tallied, and we're seeing a slight, margin. But then again, it's very close to call. That's why even news organizations have yet to give projections, as have been the practice in U.S. elections over the years. And the reason is that there are several, 50 states within the United States, and all these states have varied electoral laws. In the state of Arizona, for example, ballots that have come in as late as election day and have been postmarked need to be verified. They need to verify the signature on the ballot to the voter's roll. And then when that is done, it has to be verified by the a bipartisan panel and processed before those results are counted. And as we speak, over 100,000 of those ballots have still not been counted. And so it's not possible to state which of the candidates has won that election as we speak. Analysts are saying that it might go as late as this weekend to ensure that the entire ballot is counted. And as we speak, electoral officials in the Maricopa County, which has about 60% of votes coming out of that county for the state of Arizona alone, are still working sometimes 14, 18 hours a day since the elections to ensure that they are able to carry out their mandates. And without a clear picture of exactly where those results are going, it will be impossible to declare who the winner is, which will ultimately determine which of the major political parties will take absolute control of the Senate and decide whether or not the agenda of President Joe Biden will still be on course with 2 years for him to go, and election 2024 just around the corner today.
Right. Ignatius, thanks a lot. But before I let you go, before now, strategists, parties have claimed that the election is going to be a red wave, but it didn't happen by what we have seen. There's no red wave by what we have seen.
I'm sorry, Tunde. I cannot hear you because it's a rainy day in Washington D.C.
Right.
So we're having some some disconnections with the line. Would you be able to try again with your question?
I'll try to speak up a little bit. I said what strategists have said before this election on Tuesday was that it was going to be a red wave in both either the Senate or the Congress, but the result on Tuesday and what we have so far happened not to have gone that way.
Elections began on Tuesday. In fact, actually prior to that, because folks are allowed to vote early on before election day, the Republicans, as widely stated, were going into that election with hope of what they call a red wave, essentially banking on Joe Biden's low approval rating, high inflation, which has led to increase in food prices, in gas prices, and rents as well. Essentially to get control of Congress. But unfortunately for them, and like they reckon, and President Joe Biden said just shortly after the election, that red wave did not materialize. And essentially because of conversations about the future of democracy in this country, which has been exacerbated by former President Donald Trump's false narrative of electoral fraud in the 2020 elections, it's what really part of the reasons why many voters came out in their numbers to make their voices heard as far as that conversation is concerned. And as we heard from President Joe Biden at the White House on Wednesday, he called it, quote, good for democracy, and that Democrats had a strong night, referring to the election on Tuesday night. Former President Donald Trump also described that election as, quote, very disappointing, but added that it was a big victory for them. President Joe Biden did say that he will be running for the 2024 elections, and analysts think that he might have the chance because of how the party performed in the midterm elections. We're also expected to hear from former President Donald Trump, who had said that he has a big announcement to make on November the 15th, when analysts think could be an announcement of him running again in the 2024 elections. But on the backdrop of that is an overwhelming performance by his main challenger, the Florida governor, Ron Desantis, who was re-elected again, and also being seen as a key challenger to the ticket of Donald Trump as far as the race for 2024 election is concerned in this country. So again, the stakes are high for that election. We would have to wait until all the votes come together to know if the Democrats will maintain majority in the in the upper house, which is the Senate, with Vice President Kamala Harris being a tiebreaker in the House today.
Ignatius, let me ask you to look into the future with the Republican controlling maybe slight margin in the Congress. What will it be? What would the next 2 years be for Biden?
Okay, so right now we do know that per the results that have been released, the lower house, which is the House of Representatives, is leaning towards the Republican Party. What would happen is that if the Republican Party take hold of even the lower house of the Congress, what it means is that they will be posing a challenge to President Joe Biden's next 2 years at the White House as far as his passage of key policies are concerned. Remember that thanks to the tiebreaker that Vice President Kamala Harris has, they were able to pass key legislations like the bipartisan infrastructure law, among other laws in the country. But if it goes into the hands of the Republican Party, President Joe Biden will have a challenge as far as getting his agenda through in the House is concerned. But he also stated that he is more than willing to work with progressive Republicans. So that's the dynamics as far as the next 2 years for Joe Biden is concerned. We will again have to continue to wait for the results coming in from Arizona and Nevada to know if the Senate will go to the Democrats and give him a slight leeway as far as the 2 years is concerned for his presidency. And I'm referring to President Joe Biden.
Right, Ignatius, thanks a lot for your time on our show today. Ignatius Annor joining us live from Washington, D.C., VOA correspondent right out there, giving us update and overview what is happening. Thanks a lot, man. Thanks. It's a pleasure having you on the program today. Thank you.
Thank you, Tunde.
Pleasure.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks a lot. Right. So I'm joining us on the program today. Professor Akin Falaiye. Professor Akin Falaiye, a former senior fellow at the National Institute for Legislative Democratic Studies. He's joining us from Houston, Texas, in the U.S. Prof, thank you for taking the time to join us on the program, Professor Falaiye. Do I have Prof on the line? Hello, Prof. Are you there? Please unmute unmute yourself. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you, Prof. Thank you for taking time to join us, Prof. Falaiye, a senior, former senior fellow at the National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Studies here in Nigeria, now based in Houston, Texas, joining us all the way from Texas on the program today. Prof, you heard some of the views expressed by the VOA correspondent in Washington, D.C. But this is my question to you. We got a couple of American-born Nigerians who made big wins in this election. What does it mean for Nigerians, people like you that are based in the U.S.? With the victory most American-born Nigerians had in this election, most of them have fight for one post or the other. What does it mean for Nigerians in the U.S.?
Thank you very much for the question. Right now, at the moment, it's still premature to project how this thing will finally end up because of the inconclusiveness of some of the elections in Georgia, Nevada, and Arizona. But to speak on your question, I believe most Nigerians are watching very closely. What will be the outcome of the election? For one thing, I live in the state of Texas, which is at least moderately conservative and probably more Republican than being a Democrat. People are watching, and it has so many implications. One, there are so many Nigerians here that coming to this country, they come here for purpose of to better their lives, to go to school, to want to work, to make money, send money home. And if you have, like a Republican, which many people consider to be very unfriendly to foreigners, not in general terms, but in some specific terms, that will have, it's more likely to have a very serious implication. Those who will stay and those who will probably be repatriated to Nigeria. And the policy issues too is going to affect so many Nigerians. For instance, admission requirements, who is coming to this country, who is not coming to this country, and even the relationship again between Nigeria and the United States can be, affected by the change in party at the national level, that is in Congress and in the White House. So the Democrats are, I want to speak in the general terms, but they can lean towards the third world country and be more sympathetic to the third world country, and the Republicans, they may not be so kind towards the developing countries. On of a fact, African country has been at the bottom of policy consideration, of attention. Even though Africa has some, strategic significance to the United States, but at the same time, I believe Africans have been taken for granted. That to the extent that the focus of the United States now is the Asia area, the Asian Pacific, because of the growing influence of China, and even the incursion into Latin America, to Africa, all those factors, more or less render Africa totally, not totally, but, somehow insignificant to the American foreign policy. You can imagine during the vote whether to sanction Russia invasion of Ukraine, the United States made it clear that after the voting at the United Nations, that any African country in future should vote against American interests, is going to be penalized. In other words, America has weaponized its policy, especially towards Africa, which I think is totally unfortunate. They have the right to decide who to vote for. You can always make your case to them to vote for you or not. But to weaponize your policy, that you have to definitely vote for American interests. American interests may not be, in line with African interests, but then you see, when you look at that, it's very unfortunate. There are so many areas of cooperation that may be affected significantly as a result of the election. There's no question about it. Like I've said, it's still inconclusive to know who is going to take control of Congress. We just have to wait.
So, my last question, just if you can just answer that in a few minutes. What is the feeling like among Nigerians in Texas? I know there's a large population of Nigerians in the state of Texas. What is the feeling like with American-born Nigerians who have won their elections into different elective posts, either in the Senate or in the Congress? What is the feeling like in Texas?
I can hardly hear your question. Can you please repeat?
My question is what is the feeling like among Nigerians in Texas with the victory of American-born Nigerians who have won their election into different elective posts in the Congress?
Your question is not quite clear. I can't hear most of but let me speculate on what you are saying.
Thank you.
What I'm going to say, if you're asking me about the attitude or the feelings, of Nigerians, who takes over, again, I'm pretty new in the state of Texas, but at the same time, some of my friends that I've had the opportunity to speak with, they don't feel comfortable, some of them are, Democrats and some are Republicans, So it is, I don't want to, I can only generalize because there must be a sampling of opinion to know exactly where they stand. But in as long as I don't have that, I can only speculate that since majority of Democrats, so I will expect them to think democratically along the line of the Democrats, so to say, and that is given anyway, given the fact that they are more or less liberal-minded individuals, But again, every one of us, we are concerned, we are conscious about the outcome of the election. Who takes control is like, who take control of Congress. Again, this is a divided and polarized society politically as it is now. And because of that, it's going to affect not only Joe Biden, this is just a prelude to the 1924 election that is coming, Of in fact, the election to 2024 has begun, and the redistribution of seats, the withdrawal of boundaries is going to affect tremendously. And again, who is going to run in the 1924 election is going to be determined, somehow the performance of the midterm election, because now that Trump is positioning himself to run in the next presidential election, or in fact, he has already been attacking potential opponents in the Republican Party.
I'm afraid.
Let us wait until November 15 when he's going to make an announcement.
Thank you so much. I'm afraid I may not be able to go further with you. Prof, thanks a lot. Thank you for your time on the program. I'm afraid this far I can go. Have been speaking with Akin Falaiye, an associate professor of American governance and policies based in the state of Texas, Houston specifically. Earlier on, I had Ignatius Annor on the program who gave us an overview of the election in the state from Washington, D.C. Since this far I can go, well, we're still looking at what is going to happen the next couple of days, who takes over what in this election. But of course, as Prof said, I think the race to 2024 has started with this midterm election. My name is Tunde Alabi. Sincere appreciation to everyone who has made this program possible today. Thanks a lot and enjoy the rest of your day.